Whānau. As you can see, I am not lunch. Lunch is half an hour away, and so we thought we'd use the time wisely, and I would do my input now. But what that means is I'm just gathering my thoughts, which I would have gathered over lunch, as I gathered lunch as well. So that's fine. As I said on Tuesday, it feels like a long journey. As I said on Tuesday, I would just kind of have an opportunity to feedback some answers to things that have been raised over the 3 days that people have said, which has been really helpful. But just before I do that, I just want to say it's been a very, very rich 3 days, and one of my highlights for me is last night we got up and went to All Saints for the prayers at sort of 2 in the morning. Me and Jenny went over, and it was beautiful there, so thanks Ian for all your mahi, and very, very beautiful. So where's Ian? But what was also really great is we prayed, and that was wonderful and beautiful, and I don't know who did the holding crosses, but did one of those, which was great. But what was really lovely for me is then Chris Casey came in for the next shift, and it's so, I mean, obviously Chris works at the office and we see each other, but it's so nice to, it's kind of a sense of whānau that we're doing this together, and Chris is there and I'm there, and it's just a really nice sense that you make the baton pass to Chris, and then Chris carries on there. It was just kind of a really lovely sense in the middle of the night that we're holding this together. So that was huge. The other thing is I just want to thank you all. You know that heart and night prayer, which is the Song of Simeon, which says, I can now depart in peace. You know that part? After 3 clergy conferences, finally I won the clergy quiz. So finally I won it. I feel like I can depart in peace. I know we won it, and actually reality is I did nothing. I've got it, and people are saying, well, Alistair Hendry must be very good. Truth is, it was all Janet Tate. It was all Archdeacon Janet Tate. She was phenomenal. She just demolished it. You, Alistair picked the quality, that's true, and Janet delivered for our team. So I personally recommend that whatever you do next quiz, you get Janet in your team, and you start negotiating now to get Janet. That is all the difference. What's that? Okay, thank you, Alistair. I look forward to that. Hey, I want to pull a few things together and answer some questions that people have given me. So again, this is just kind of apologies. It's a bit like housekeeping, and so apologies for that. First thing is, thank you, Nigel, for the metaphor idea this morning. I'd never thought of it in those sort of terms. And so what I'd like to do is probably bounce off what Nigel said just a little bit and say, when I started to think then of the metaphor of the family, I'd probably say, if we're going to go for a metaphor, I would say the metaphor, which I think includes family, discipleship, and last least, is we are the people who gather around the banqueting table and go to the highways and byways and invite people in. Which is the idea that we're people of the feast of the table, and we go to the highways and the byways and invite people in. And I think that kind of is a beautiful metaphor for us. You know, that it is about us gathering around the table, but gathering around a table in such a way that we're always inviting in the lost, last and the least. And so I think I'd like to thank Nigel for giving us that framework, which I thought was really useful. And so thank you for that. Next on my list, sorry. Rosie Dill has asked me 2 questions, and they're very good ones, Rosie. So first of all, full credit to you for the courage to ask them, so that's good. And this first question I want to spend some time on, because I reckon it's a real fundamental question that Rosie has asked for some clarification on, and that's this. I'll paraphrase it. Basically, Rosie asks, how do we go about looking after the old and caring for the old and developing the old while we still need to grow the edge? And how do we do that? Understand the question? Really good question. I want to give you a few thoughts around that, okay? And it's a good question. I would actually like to do a whole hour in time on that, because I think it's a fundamental question, but let me give you a few starters on that. First thing is, just as a background, I'm quite impacted by a guy called John Perkins, who's an Afro-American Christian who specialises, he's probably the specialist in Christian community development, okay? And he's an old fella now and amazing legacy. But he says I'm paraphrasing again, but in order for a village to be rebirthed, you need 3 types of people. You need those who remain, those who return, and those who relocate. Okay? In order for this village to be renewed, we need the faithful cradle-to-death Anglicans. We need the remainers. However, we need more than that. We need the returners. Those who were brought up Anglican, went off, learned a whole lot of stuff, and have now come back. And finally, we need the relocators, people who aren't like us historically, but have grafted in. All those 3 have a place at our table and give us something that we need. And so that's the first principle, I would say, in relation to centre and edge, is recognising we need all 3 groups of people to renew the village. Second thing I would say is what we need to recognise, and I'm speaking, I'm doing generalisations here, okay? So I know there's always exceptions and generalisations, and I know that I'm being simplistic. Actually, a side comment is I said once on the same-sex discussion, I said, I know I'm being simplistic here, but let's say the conservative position, blah, 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 whatever. I then get a letter in the mail that says, please don't call me simple. It's like, I didn't call you simple, I just want to get the categories, but anyway. So let me be really clear that we are doing broad generalisations. But as a broad generalisation, many of us find ourselves in a position where we have been trained and our primary skill set and gift set is to continue in what we have known. Okay, so many of us have been trained in that way and have spent 20, 30, 40 years, the Anglicans, in that way of ministry. So I think the first thing to recognise is we have to locate ourselves, in some senses, with humility and say, actually, I'm wired this way. You know, and that's fine because we need every gift, every type of person. But I think what's important is we locate ourselves and we say, actually, primarily, most of us in this room are wired in the way that we are people who have given our life, our calling, to develop the traditional parish ministry. Wonderful. So what that means, therefore, is when we locate ourselves and our primary skill set in the way we're wired, what it means, therefore, is we're not saying we're experts at the other. And that's really important. That's really important, to recognise that this is what I'm wired to do, and I do this really well, but therefore I'm not an expert at that. Because most of us, therefore, are not the sort of people who will be pioneer, edgy, replanters, all that. That's great. That's fine. As Nigel said, we have to be true to our best self and respond to our call. And so we're recognising that's what it is. Therefore, the question for many of us is, how do I be my best and nourish and continue to support and develop the parish structure, but then and what's my responsibility to the edge? The first thing is make sure you know what you're not. Second thing is this. Do the new or the edge needs its own structure. Don't try to put the new with the old. Somebody famous once said something about wine skins. I'm not quite sure how that one works, okay? But don't try to put the new with your old. So let me be really practical. If you've got somebody in your parish who says something along the lines of, man, this stinks, I could do a lot better than this, we could do a lot better than that, don't put them on your vestry. Okay? Don't put them on your vestry. That's not a wise way. Don't try to pull them into the centre. Instead, create a space for them to be able to create what they feel God's inviting them to. But don't try to put it into the centre. Otherwise, you're going to put attention everywhere that you don't need. You do not have to understand the edge. You do not have to agree necessarily with the edge, but you have to feel like God is working there. And then you can, in trust, support it. Okay? Classic thing is, the edge is by nature, often people initially who are kind of the more the pioneers, they're motivated by a strong deconstruct and reconstruct. What they say is, man, we can do better than this. And I'm happy to have a go at doing better than this. Now, if you're somebody who's given your life to the parish, you could be threatened by that. Or you can say, this is a wonderful gift and let's support it and have a go at it and let's keep it a safe distance. You understand? But we need to have that. In some senses, we want those people who are motivated by a strong deconstruct and then a strong reconstruct. But we need to create the space for them to be able to do that. So do not pull them into the centre of your parish life and do not put them on your vestry and do it. Instead, work out a way of supporting them on the edge and allowing them the space to create what they need to create. Now, most of us probably don't have necessarily the skill set to mentor and support edge pioneer people, which is fine. Then make sure that you put a structure around them where they can get supported and mentored by people who do understand pioneer and edge ministry. But don't assume that you know, because that will be very painful for both parties. Okay? So the idea is to create a space, and I think again, the idea is to create a safe space. Now, in our diocese, as you know, just to let you bouncing around a little bit here, as you know, next year we're going to move into starting to focus on lost last least as we sort of spiral through family discipleship, lost last least, and then start the journey again. And so we're going to put focus on actually trying to raise up amongst us people who can pioneer, who can rebirth, etc. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a mentor and support structure that we can help these people do that. Okay? And we can put our best mentor and support people who actually know how to do that, mentoring those people. And that's the idea, okay? So therefore it means that you, as a parish leader, need not necessarily do that, but you do need to create a space and allow that to happen. And you need to make sure that although you do not understand it, that you are supportive and have its back. Because when the other people in your congregation feel a bit slighted because these people have come in and by mistake broken a window or whatever in our precious parishes, you go, praise God, isn't it good that people are using our church such to the extent that somebody breaks a window? I look forward to the day when we break 10 windows a month because our church is so full. You understand? So you need to err on the side of supporting the pioneer and edge because people respect you in the centre. So you have to err on the side of validating and supporting and having their back, and when they make mistakes and when it's carnage and when the police get called or whatever, you say, well, wasn't that fun? Let's do it again. Let's pick up the pieces. And that's your role. Your role is to be the supportive sponsors of the edge, because people will look to you. People will look to you as leaders of parishes in that role. They will look to you. And so what we can't have is, in order for us to grow the edge and to grow the parishes, what we can't have is tension between the two. And we can't have playing off between the two. We all rise together. And so we have to be really careful that we don't allow a playing off. Doesn't mean we understand. The fact is we're on this thing, that means we don't understand this. That's by very nature. But we can trust God's Spirit's working here, and we can support. And so we need to sort of develop that idea. Let me see what else I've got there. I might stop there, but that's just giving a little bit of some headway. But we are going to get a structure in place in the diocese where we put mentoring, support and development around those edgy people. Because they are a pain they're a pain somewhere. But we so need them. And we need all of us. We need everybody. Okay, so I'll leave that one there, but that gives you some ideas of what we need to do. But I'd like to do a whole session on that sometime and give you a whole lot more structures and strategies around that. But that's enough for that moment. Just pulling out a few things from this. What I think we have to remember as a people is this. And from this 3 days, it's become really apparent. 200 years ago, the gospel was first preached here, but it was translated into Māori. Otherwise, it would have been complete and utter waste of time. We have always been an incarnational people at our best. A people who have always tried to make sure the good news of Jesus Christ is grounded in the place where it is spoken and preached. We need to take that same principle now into our life going forward. As I said the other day, actually, we now are just not talking the language where people are hearing the good news of Jesus Christ anymore. We need to find contemporary ruataras who will translate for us, who will do that for us, because we're in many ways are now no longer fluent in this land. And I'm talking obviously, yes, Māori, but more than that, in wider culture we are no longer fluent, and the gospel is now no longer being responded to because we're not fluent. We're no longer understanding what resonates with our people. And so we need the help of some people. We need the contemporary ruataras who will help us do that again and translate for us until we become multilingual again. And obviously I'm using lots of different metaphors here, so you know what I'm doing, okay? So we need to do that. What I think has been beautiful is us hearing again over the last 3 days who we really are. We are a people of tenacity. We are people of courage. We are people of mission. We are people of sacrificial lifestyle. This is our DNA. This is what we are this is why we're telling our story again, so we can remember who we are in this land. A little slight issue. I went up to Keith afterwards and said, Keith, hold on mate, can you clarify something for me? What's a lay priest? Yeah. I mean, what was Octavius Hadfield doing when he had a lay priest? I mean, what category is that? And what he was doing is he was recognising some new context, and he was trying to work out how to kind of work out the traditional ecclesiology in this new context. He just didn't have the name approved parish chaplain yet. Accredited, thank you. But you see, you see, they were creative people reimagining the gospel and working in number 8 fencing wire to try to work out how to be faithful to who we were in this land. And as a missionary people, it was governed by that sense of The gospel of Jesus and faithfulness to our tradition must be preached and proclaimed and lived throughout this place. That's our call as well. Let me clear up a few other things. I want to move on from that. Let me clear up a few other things. First thing is, all of you hopefully have received a coffee card. If you haven't, come and get one off me. There is a vicious rumour that they will start appearing on Trade Me. Okay, now that could be very interesting, and I would be interested to see how much I'd be worth a coffee day condition. But please can I ask you to refrain from that, but it could be a thing of the spirit. Okay, moving through. The other day on Tuesday, I was not quite totally clear on something, and I really appreciate Jenny Sims for picking me up on it. She says, you said nothing, you're trying really hard for nothing to be compulsory when I was referring to, you don't have to come to this, or this, or this. Yes, that is true. However, we have made clusters compulsory for priests in charge and vicars, so that is a compulsory thing. So thanks, Jenny, for making sure I clarify that, because the cluster model of that relational thing of needing to do that, that is compulsory. So we're not true that everything is in flux. Okay. Second thing is, then I heard that somebody says, well, why have I been told that I have to do diploma in Anglican studies then if it's not compulsory? Good question. It's because you are on the ordination journey, and we need to make sure you're theologically literate, and we will make you do something to make sure you're theologically literate. That's different than all of us having to do that. You understand? And let me tell a little bit about Diploma of Anglican Studies, why that's so important to us, and why that is our preferential option for theology. It's because Diploma of Anglican Studies has been designed to not just be about theology, but also about community and formation, or let's put it another way, being about family and discipleship. So we're taking our core values and embedding them into our theological training. So anybody who's trained theologically gets our DNA. And that's why it's our preferred option, not because, it may be that Otago or others or Laidlaw or whoever, maybe the theology may be just as good or better, however the DNA, you will not get the DNA. And so what we've already found in the Diploma of Anglican Studies is the offshoot of people's lives growing in Jesus, and the relational community connection across our diocese is phenomenal. And that's important to us. And so that's why Diploma of Anglican Studies, we want to get the right people there, because what it means is relationally, they're not just studying, but relationally they're building relationships that will last to the future and strengthen ourselves across this diocese. And that's why it's really important for us, okay? That's the Diploma of Anglican Studies. Just to remind you, I suppose, and to say I haven't forgotten, again, we need to be the people who role model this stuff. And again, I've asked at the beginning of the year that I would like to send an email out to you saying, who are you discipling? Who are you discipling? Who am I discipling? How are you doing it? And again, it's not a pass or a fail. I'm just trying to say, hey, are we picking this stuff up? So I'm going to send an email out after, and I just want to know the good news. And if you're not doing it, that's fine. Don't be fuckamara about it or embarrassed. That's fine. But we just want to encourage the fact that actually it is about our own journeys of discipleship. So I'll send it out after conference. But just be honest, say, look, I'm not on that journey yet. That's fine. Okay, but those of you who are, I want to know how you're doing that, because we can all be encouraged by that. Final thing, I think, on my list, and then we get to go for lunch. This is another Rosie issue, so I'm bookending it, and thank you, Rosie, for this one too. And thanks for reminding me, and I really mean that. I said, post-General Synod in the North and South meetings, I said that I would, when I was away overseas, I would reflect on what I felt comfortable about doing in relation to the recognition service mentioned in Motion 30 on the same-sex discussion as General Synod. We all know what I'm talking about. We've located that discussion. Okay, here's where I have come to on the recognition service, so that you know. I was deeply impacted, and I spent a lot of time thinking when I was overseas on the final meeting we had in the north of the diocese in Palmerston. I don't know who were there, but by the last question that was asked to me, if you remember, it was a great pearly question, which was basically, what about Sodom and Gomorrah? Now, I spent a lot of time, therefore, when I was away, actually, just rethinking that question and rethinking that whole thing in relation to this issue. And I thought, again, I think most scholars, evangelical or whatever side of the spectrum you are, just about everybody agrees that the Sodom and Gomorrah text is actually about hospitality and breaking hospitality. So it's not a proper text in this issue. But I did think it was really interesting that God may have been speaking to me about that by using that text. Because it was just in my brain for a long time. And so here's how I see the recognition issue. I see through the Old and New Testament that God has an incredible value on hospitality to the stranger and to the other. That is an Old and New Testament principle which I think is unarguable. And therefore, no matter where you sit on the spectrum of response to this issue, I would like to believe we can all agree on the Old and New Testament principle of radical hospitality to the stranger and the other. Okay? And I think it's very parallel, actually, to what we experienced on Tuesday in the porphyry process. That in the porphyry process, we are recognised. Doesn't mean people agree or disagree. We're just recognised in the porphyry process. We're recognised for our whakapapa and where we've come from. We're recognised for what we're bringing to the table. We're just recognised. And I personally think that it would be a break with biblical hospitality to the stranger and the other to not recognise people amongst us. Using the contemporary language of the Avatar movie, I see you. Doesn't mean I'm saying I agree or disagree. It's irrelevant. The point is, I see you and I recognise you. Doesn't mean I sit in judgment one way or the other. It means I see and I recognise you. And so for me, I think that that is an expression of a church showing radical hospitality at this point in history, which I would hope that actually we could get our heads around, wherever we sit on that spectrum. That actually it's just about recognising the stranger and the other for those of us who have that framework. So what I want to see us do then is I've got some people hopefully working on a little liturgical formula that kind of does that. It doesn't say that we bless this or condone this or anything like that. It says we recognise you and we recognise your life. We don't compartmentalise you off. We recognise you. So that's kind of where I sit on that, and there's a little liturgical kind of group kind of doing that. But please understand the framework, which is one of I can't see according to biblical hospitality, which I think we could all agree with in the Old and New Testament, that of the need to recognise the stranger and the other amongst us. That I see you. I see you. Interestingly enough, I think, and just the thing is, Motion 30, I think, mentions this, and I think as a church we've mentioned this constantly, that we have said as a church, that whatever we think on this spectrum, we recognise that we need to hear the voices. How can we hear the voices if we don't recognise people? Whether we agree or disagree, we've all said that actually we need to hear the voices. And unless we recognise people, how can we, if we don't recognise them, how can their voice be heard? So that's where I've sat. Took me a long time, a lot of walking to get that one, people, I want you to know that. So I appreciate, we'll do some liturgical work around that and try to find something that fits into that space, coming from that sense of hospitality, if you understand that. So that's where it kind of sits. That's kind of probably all I need to say at the moment. I've sort of answered the questions that people have sort of put before me, and I've cleared up a few things, etc. We will go to lunch now. I'll pass it back to you, Graham. And we will look forward to the Eucharist this afternoon.